We are now, in many ways, emerging from the wilderness time of COVID. It's like we can see some kind of end in sight, finally. And though the desire to sprint out of here and never look back is real, this moment is actually the right time to stop, look back, and consider what has saved us and served us well on this trek through the wilderness of COVID. Which is why for the month of July, as we enjoy our glorious Pacific Northwest summer, each Sunday we pause together, we set down our packs, and we peek inside to see what we carry with us, the things we did, the practices or learning we picked up in the last year that have helped us survive through this time. It's our chance to name that there might actually be good things from this time of COVID that we want to bring with us into the next season. Because, according to the Jesus story, we are not exempt from facing hard times. Other wilderness times will come. So let's keep what we've gathered up in this wilderness, because also, according to the Jesus story, it is in our wilderness times, like a global pandemic and racial reckoning, that God shows up and does some of God's best work. So surely there is something here in us from this wilderness. Let's not leave it behind. So friends, let's dig in together now. What saved you and what served you well during COVID? What will you bring with you? Let's reflect, bring it with us as we live into the new normal together. Right, friends. I love all the bustle of activity that's happening on the patio. It's so good. Thank you. It just feels like you're at home and doing what you need to do, and I just love it. So thank you. And it's good to be here. And yes, we are in this season right now where we just say, yes, we believe God does God's best work when times are hard, and living through global pandemic, which is what all of the last 500 days have been. These are hard times, right? Times a million. It's been so much. And so we trust that God has helped us make our way through, which is why this month we have this chance to stop and ask, what are we carrying with us? What saved us and served us well during this time of COVID? And so we get to ask, what do we want to bring with us? Hang on. So friends, just get a good deep breath. And I just want to dive into where we're headed today, okay? To frame today's conversation, we're going to open up the Bible and let the story of God guide us into this conversation. And we're going to join Moses as he is shepherding his sheep in a moment where God holds his attention with a bush that seems to burn with fire, yet it is not consumed, right? So I'm going to invite Greg to come on up and read for us.
Exodus 3, 1 through 12 from the Inclusive Bible. Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. Leading the flock deep into the wilderness, Moses came to Horeb, the mountain of God. The messenger of Yahweh appeared to Moses in a blazing fire from the midst of a thorn bush. Moses saw, the bush is ablaze with fire, and yet it isn't consumed. Moses said, "Let me go over and look at this remarkable sight and see why the bush doesn't burn up." When Yahweh saw Moses coming closer, God called out to him from the midst of the bush, "Moses, Moses." Moses answered, "I am here." God said, "Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground." "I am the God of your ancestors," the voice continued, "the God of Sarah and Abraham, the God of Rebekah and Isaac, the God of Leah and Rachel and Jacob." Moses hid his face, afraid to look at the Holy One. Then Yahweh said, "I have seen the affliction of my people in Egypt. I've heard the cries under those who oppress him. I have felt their sufferings. Now I have come down to rescue them from the hand of Egypt, out of their place of suffering, and bring them to a place that is wide and fertile, a land flowing with milk and honey, the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the children of Israel has reached me, and I have watched how the Egyptians are oppressing them. Now go, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the children of Israel out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and lead the children of Israel out of Egypt?" God answered, "I will be with you, and this is the sign by which you will know that it is I who have sent you. After you bring my people out of Egypt, you all will worship at this very mountain."
Thank you, Greg. Hang on to that for later. So last summer, summer 2020, when we had been home for some 100 days or so, one evening, Jason and I were out on one of our daily walks with our kids, which took us down a trail into dense forest, mossy, just beautiful woods that near our home that we didn't even know were there until COVID happened, and we found ourselves, exploring a bit. And that particular evening, we saw an owl. Have you ever seen an owl in the wild? Have you seen one? Yeah. I mean, there's just something to them that there's just like a magical quality. I don't know, it's just really magnificent to see them. So we watched the owl. It was a barred, B-A-R-R-E-D, a barred owl. And we looked it up later. So as we're watching it, it's up in a large leaf maple tree, and it's sitting there for a little while, turning its head like it does, and then it hops up into a place where the trunk splits a bit. It hops up in there just for a moment, and then it flies back out with a squirrel in its talons. I mean, right? So we're like, ah! And then it swoops down over us. It lands in another tree, not about 30 feet maybe, just behind us and up a little bit. It lands there. Shortly, another owl comes screeching in, and they start fighting over the squirrel. And then a third owl comes in, and they're screeching. And I kind of instinctively move in front of Levi, our smallest tender morsel. I'm like, "You shall not have this one." And he's like, "Mom, I want to go home." I'm like, "I know, right?" It was super intense. And we're watching, and they fight for a while, and then finally the first one gets away and flies off, and they all follow. And it was just so amazing, so cool. And it wasn't the first owl that we had seen on our walks, but it was definitely the most action that we had seen. We will always remember that event, right? So we're becoming more and more accustomed to finding all kinds of critters on these walks that we've been taking as a family since COVID started, which, man, we started because our kids were home from school and they needed recess, right? And we're like, well, we need to run them. Let's go for a walk, So we would do that. And so we were on this trail by our house every day, finding all kinds of new trails and new sidewalks and new neighborhoods and new furry critters and feathered friends. My friends, I wonder, are you someone who started doing more walking during COVID? Did that happen for you too? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it could be connected with, a pandemic puppy that you acquired, right? So that could be why you're doing more walking. Let's be honest about that. So we did the walking part, not the puppy part. And I had already been walking the trails by our house almost daily since my brain injury in fall of 2018. But once COVID hit, we were all on it, and so was the majority of the folks in the surrounding neighborhoods around us. Was that your experience too? It was just everyone, yeah, right. Because gyms closed, so people walked or bought a Peloton, right? Yeah. Which, it's worth noting, this fairly universal phenomenon that arose this past nearly 500 days, this phenomenon of walking. Have you ever noticed how much Jesus walked? Jesus walked a lot, so the 4 Gospels are just peppered with stories of him walking into the countryside, walking from town to town, walking by the Sea of Galilee, walking in the temple, and even walking on water, right? Really, he walked everywhere, and I always assumed that he had no choice but to walk, but he was a pretty connected guy, and if Jesus wanted it, someone could have loaned him a really fast horse to get around, right? But instead, he chose to walk everywhere he went, except for that little short stint on a donkey at the very end. But I think about it, what if Jesus had a car? Or even that horse? It's hard to imagine what his impact might have looked like and how different it would have been. Because walking gave Jesus time to see things like the cloudy eyes of the begging man sitting on the side of the road, or the round black eyes of sparrows sitting in their cages at the market. If Jesus had been moving more quickly, even to reach more people, these things might have become a blur for him. Because he was moving slowly, they came into focus for him just as he came into focus for them. Sometimes Jesus had a destination, sometimes he did not. For many who followed him around, he was the destination. Whether he was going somewhere or nowhere at all, going with him was the point. Food tasted better at the pace that he set. Stories lasted longer. Talk went deeper. So historically, and even now, we really focus our attention on what Jesus said and what he did. We pay less attention to the pace at which Jesus did these things. Jesus was a walker, not a rider, right? He took his sweet time. This is why we hear him say things like in Luke 12 when he says, "Look at the ravens, free and unfettered, not tied down to a job description, carefree in the care of God. Walk into the fields and look at the wildflowers. They don't fuss with their appearance, but have you ever seen color and design quite like it? The 10 best-dressed men and women in the country look shabby alongside them. If God gives such attention to the wildflowers, most of them never even seen, don't you think he'll attend to you, take pride in you, do his best for you?" Jesus had spiritual things to say about the everyday things, which he says because he was moving slowly enough to see them. So I've never stopped to think about the pace at which Jesus moves. Have you? I mentioned Barbara Brown Taylor's book last Sunday too, An Altar in the World, and she includes walking the earth as a spiritual practice, as one of those things that we do that we don't really think of as spiritual, yet really it can be. The spiritual practice of walking, like the physicality of walking itself, as well as the pace of it. This just really resonates with our experience through this wilderness of COVID. In many ways, I know for me, for our family, life during COVID, it was so much more full and really overwhelming, but it was also smaller and slower, and our daily walks feel like an embodiment of that. I mentioned 2 Sundays ago how I've no bragging to do about my productivity during COVID, right? No sourdough bread. No new hobbies, no new skills, no new hustle. What did we do? Man, we just survived. And a big part of what made that possible during COVID was that we have walked the earth. Oh, we walked. Even when it was raining, we would walk. We would just call them umbrella walks. Come on, kids, let's go. And man, we watched the slow movement of the seasons evolving all around us on the trail, seeing so many critters from coyotes to northern flickers to quails, frogs, deer, eagles, and a shrew. I didn't even know what it was when I saw it. We noticed the daily changes. We'd point out new blossoms or the fabulous sunset and always the slugs. So many slugs, right? There was one day, just one road, we counted, 120 slugs, just 135 slugs, just this stretch of maybe 300 yards. It was nuts. And the bunnies. Oh, the bunnies everywhere too. And I don't want to paint at a too idyllic picture. There were definitely tantrums and bickering that happened on the walks too, right? Exactly. And also, I would try to count the silence in my head for how long it would be quiet, and I never got past 4, right? It just was always something. So it was a lot, but we walked, and our pace changed. Not only making time for those walks, but when everything was canceled and we suddenly weren't overcommitted, this is what we did, and our whole pace of life slowed down, and we were still working and schooling from home, so things were absolutely, completely overwhelming also at the same time. But right alongside that, it was a slower pace. It was a smaller scale. We were less concerned about getting somewhere, partly because we literally had nowhere to go. But this is just a really key learning for us. Barbara Brown Taylor, she says, most of us spend so much time thinking about where we have been or where we are supposed to be going, and wasn't that true the last 16 months? We're so focused on that we have a hard time recognizing where we actually are. And I love this next sentence most. She says, when someone asks us where we want to be in our lives, where do you want to be in your life? The last thing that occurs to us is to look down at our feet and say, here, I want to be here, since this is where I am. To set our pace slower like this, a pace at which we can see where we are, is a kind of practice that can seep into how we carry ourselves in the world all the time. And as I consider what is like saving me right now, what saved me and served me well during COVID, it is the spiritual practice of walking the earth. Actually walking through the woods, yes, yet also just like the slower pace at which I moved through my life. I wonder what you found yourself doing in this past year that has been that spiritual practice of walking the earth. And maybe not literally going for a walk, but maybe. But what practices did you find yourself in during COVID that moved you at a slower pace? You may not have chosen it. It doesn't have to be something you did every day. Maybe your slower pace actually does include a new hobby or skill that you've made time for. Like you've made time to like build something or grow something or bake, garden, to play in ways that slow you down to the crush of everything else. I know we have more bakers out there too, so. I spent time, I know, in the corners of my house that I'd never spent time in before, like in the corner of my basement, which became like my work setup. And that's where I filmed all those Zoom videos with Pastor Ryan when we were pretending to talk to each other. So like I'd never actually like spent time in this particular corner. So I felt like I was getting to know and love my home in a new way because of COVID. But I wonder what it was for you. What helped or forced you to slow down and see where you are this year? I ask you because I know for me, now that things are picking back up again, like I'm really grieving how our family missed like the slow daily growth of the foxglove flowers along the trail. We saw it like every day we'd report, oh, look, it's gone this far, it's grown this much, like to all of them that were growing. We call them fish face flowers though, because they kind of, if you know them, they look like, whoa, they look like big fish opening their mouth. But we missed them because our neighborhood swim team was back on this year, and so we had evening practices, so that's where we were. And I'm having a hard time just generally picking up the pace. Anyone with me? Like to actually like make it to in-person meetings and to actually have a plan and like schedule for things. And like we haven't done it. It's just such a shift. And I miss that slower pace already. And it's exhausting now to have to like do more things, even as it is wonderful. And I've missed it. And I wonder if what you're missing also is just the things that have slowed you down. And I wonder if, like me, you want to find ways to keep some of these practices alive. Maybe in a new way, in a new form, because it can't be exactly the same as it was, but even now to hang on to it as we emerge into busier times. Whatever it is that you did that you found that slowed you down, this is something you can keep. Whether now or maybe for next time when you're in a similar season, like you'll remember that this is something that you have with you. These are yet more gifts that we can carry with us from COVID, that you can choose to bring with you as you walk the earth, with or without owls hunting squirrels, okay? But to close our time and as we hold these questions, I want to bring us back to Moses. And I want to share with you something Rob Bell wrote some time ago in response to the question, if you could give any advice for the day, what would it be? And I want to just read what he wrote, and I offer it for us as a word of commissioning and a word of blessing. So just take a moment again to breathe, to open, close your eyes if you'd like, and receive this blessing and invitation for today and for every day. Walk, don't run. That's it. Walk, don't run. Slow down, breathe deeply, and open your eyes because there's a whole world right here within this one. The bush doesn't suddenly catch on fire. It's been burning the whole time. Moses is simply moving slowly enough to see it. And he does. He takes off his sandals, not because the ground has suddenly become holy, but because he's just now becoming aware that the ground has been holy the whole time. Efficiency is not God's highest goal for your life. Neither is busyness. or how many things you can get done in one day, or speed, or even success, but walking, which leads to seeing. Now that's something. That's the invitation for every one of us today and every day, in every conversation, interaction, event, and moment, to walk, not run. And in doing so, to see a whole world right here within this one. My friends, COVID gave us this gift of walking the earth, of moving at a slower pace. And I know I want to find ways to bring that with me. How about you? So we're going to sing a glorious song that it's an old hymn that reminds us of the wonders of God that is around us all the time. And as we sing, just spend that time intentionally naming that thing that you're grateful for that slowed you down. And those at home can share that in the comments if you'd like, and we can share with each other later too. But name that practice that slowed you down and hold it before God with curiosity, just asking that question of what does this look like as things are changing? How do I hold on to this thing that was so formative that helped slow me down? And friends, I commission you to walk, not run this week, to walk the earth, for walking leads to seeing, and to be curious about and name and keep on with those things that have slowed you down. We don't have to return to what was. We can let this time now be a fresh start into a new way of being together. Amen? Amen.
For the beauty of the earth, for the glory of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies. Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the beauty of each hour of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light. Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of